Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to talk today about working with our clients and working with rental properties. So there's a lot of tricky situations we need to navigate when working with tenants. And I just want to make sure you guys know from a listing perspective and from a purchaser's perspective, how to protect our clients and how not to get in trouble with the landlord and tenant board. So have any of you sold rental properties with tenants in it? What sort of problems have you encountered? Right? Nobody? So it can get a little difficult when you have a tenant in the property. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a property listed and then because it was during COVID, the tenants were very sticklers for the gloves and sanitizing and everything, even though they weren't supposed to be home. But they were home and then they were complaining that the showings were not up to their standard, but
Right.
And then we ended up having to stop the showings because they claimed they had COVID.
Right. I remember that. So it can be very difficult. Tenants can pose a big problem. You want to really make friends with your clients' tenants. Make sure you treat them very sweet and very fairly because they can make or break your sale at the end of the day. A lot of tenants can come in, especially if they're angry that they're being kicked out of the property because the landlord is selling. They can really kill your sale by always sticking around, not keeping the property neat and clean for showings, not being cooperative with timings for showings and approving appointments coming through, bad mouthing the property or the area or the neighbors to the people that are walking through, the buyers that are walking through. So you really, really want to make sure you make friends with these tenants. So I always insist on coming for a first visit before I list the property and start showing it. And I go in and I chat with the tenants a little bit and I assure them, I say, no, especially now during COVID, I say, the showings are really, restricted. There's no double bookings. People are wearing masks. I'm going to put hand sanitizer here. Please leave all your lights on so nobody's touching the surfaces, and leave because it's safer for you, right? While people are walking through the property. Really, I just want the tenant not to be there during the showing most of the time, right? So you want to also ensure them that they're going to be getting their 24 hours notice for sure. As for the landlord and tenant board, it's 24 hours written notice. So instead of picking up the phone and calling the tenant, I usually put them in a WhatsApp chat or a text, or I always ask them which way is best to correspond with them because you want proof that you're giving them that 24 hours notice. Some tenants are really nice and they'll accept showings without 24 hours notice. But if you do hit a sticky one, I know a lot of people get scared and say the tenant is refusing the showing. Well, the landlord and tenant board works both ways. If I'm giving you 24 hours written notice, I'm allowed to enter the property because most leases that they've signed are saying that within reason, when we're come time to either sell or relist the property for lease, that we're going to be giving you this 24-hour written notice and you have to let the people in, the prospective buyers and the prospective tenants in. Right? So if you're selling a rental property, there's some things in place. So obviously, if it's your client's investment property and it's vacant, it's super easy. It's going to go like any other residential sale. You can just stage the property, list it, and sell it as normal. Is it not showing on the computer today? Oh, I need to share the screen with you guys. I wonder why.
I just thought it was beautiful.
This is my phone, though. I wonder how my phone's up there. Yeah, it might be in my office. Can you check for me? Yeah, because that's my phone screen. That's funny how it's sharing that on the back. Anyways, so
that's not your laptop screen, is it?
No, that's not my. I don't believe so. Let me just check here real quick.
Has to be Christine.
Really? Like
well, that's very creepy.
Isn't that? That's why I'm kind of creeped out by it. Where am I here on my screen? I don't even have mouse control. Sorry, guys. My background screen isn't working for everybody in the office here. See how it's frozen? That is frozen. I'm just trying to get the screen working here for everybody in the office. 1 second. See how the mouse isn't working?
Oh, right. No,
what
no,
if
no,
I
because you have
it's
a Mac, sorry.
No, this is just.
Oh, this is not a Mac? Okay,
no.
Here. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Vasco.
One of the currently the PIN number or some information, but they open now.
It might be the background here. Do you have mouse control though?
No.
No. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. Give me 2 minutes online there.
Yes.
I don't know why my mouse is frozen.
I don't have mouse control.
No mouse, right?
I know. Yeah, I'm trying to.
What if I Well, there we go. So the best thing for them to do is to agree to leave the property. Thank you very much, Paul. The best thing to do is for them to agree to leave the property. I was just going over, sorry, you guys, I didn't realize that you couldn't hear me there online because I restarted. We were saying that you have to wait for the lease to expire in order to give a tenant notice. So if their lease doesn't expire until December, you have to let the purchaser know that they have to assume the tenant. But there's different ways you can try and coax a tenant into wanting to leave so you can give vacant possession for the property. I was just explaining, if it is the end of their lease term, you have to give them 2 pay periods. So if they pay month to month, it would be 60 days. If they're paying biweekly, it would be a month. So that's sort of just like a brief synopsis of what you guys missed when my sound wasn't on there. So some people opt to pay their tenant to vacate. So a lot of times the last month's rent is free. You have that on deposit. You can offer to give that back to them towards putting first and last down on another property if they leave earlier than that last month, right? So you can give them basically, you know, that cost back. You can offer to pay their moving costs, help to pay their moving costs. A lot of times landlords will go, I don't want to pay their moving costs, but it is a lot cheaper in the end to pay somebody's moving costs of a moving truck for wherever they're going to than have to pay out maybe their whole rent deposit, right? You can cover their security deposit for the future property. So that's similar to giving them their last month's back if they choose to vacate early. So there's different things you can do to help your tenant agree to vacate. Now, I just want to share my screen. There's a couple of forms from the landlord and tenant board. I don't know if you guys have ever used them before, but if someone agrees, say for instance, I say to them, okay, your lease term ends in 60 days. So you agree to leave, what are we, July coming up now? So end of July, end of August, you agree to leave September 1st from the property. You can get someone to sign an N11, okay? So as per the landlord and tenant board, there's the N11 here. Let me just go. Let me just open up my email here so I can get you guys sharing the screen. The N11 basically is a form that allows the landlord and the tenant to both agree upon a move out date. So let me just go here and open the form for you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, no problem.
When you say move out date, what do you mean? Move yourself out or move the furniture out? Or you leave the furniture there for another month or two and you move yourself out if you don't like the unit?
No, a move out date would mean you'd have to vacate the premises yourself and all of your belongings. Yeah, basically you're looking for the tenant to give vacant possession of the property, which means everything moved out and cleaned out, given back in the way that they rented it originally, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna go here and open up the N11. So the N11 looks like this for anybody who hasn't seen it. This is an agreement to end the tenancy. So it's a really simple form. If you've got a nice tenant that says, yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, I understand you're selling and you're not going to renew my lease. So I'll sign an N11, okay? A lot of times as the purchaser of a rental property, I'll ask for this from the listing agent. And a lot of them have never heard of it before. So I just wanted you guys to know and be smart listing agents for your rental properties, what these forms look like. So you can offer these up to your buyer agents to give them a little layer of security to know that you're going to give them a vacant property, right? So you just put in the name of the tenant and the name of the landlord, the address of the rental unit, and the landlord and the tenant agree that the tenancy will end on, and then you put the date in there that you've agreed. Sometimes you'll get really lucky and you'll get a nice tenant, for instance, saying that their lease isn't ending until December, but they'll still sign an N11 if you've given them 60 days or offered them some kind of incentive, okay? This is basically just a nice little form to prove in writing that you both have agreed on the date. Very often you'll find that you might have a tenant in the property. The tenant will go, no problem, I'll leave by September 1st. But then September 1st rolls around and they haven't found a property. So now that person starts to get a little, give a little pushback. You as a listing agent have guaranteed vacant possession of the property and the buyer agent's about to close and now you have this tenant that won't leave. So what do you do if it's just a verbal agreement between the two of you? This definitely offers a little layer of security for you, knowing that they put something in writing, and at least you can enforce it a little bit harder because now you have something to go to the landlord and tenant board with this N11, right? Another form that you can use, I'll just stop the share and go back because sometimes I lose the share there if I don't do it this way, is the N12, okay? The N12 is a different type of form, but it's very similar to the N11. But this just states that you're selling the property. This is more giving the tenant notice. So it's the end of your term, the end of August, and I'm not going to renew your lease for the following reason. So the tenant's name, the landlord's name, the address of the rental unit. I'm giving you this notice because I want to end your tenancy. I want you to move out of your rental unit by the following termination date. So you put, say, September 1st there. And just a word of caution, I would never put this the same date as your closing date as a listing agent, because you never know, if there's a tricky situation or something happens with the tenants at the end there. Always give myself a week or two buffer when I sell rental properties. So I definitely, if the closing date was, September 14th, I'd make sure that, I get the tenant to move out by the 1st or something. But then the landlord and tenant board gives you these different reasons. The reason for ending your tenancy. I have shaded the circle for my reason to end your tenancy. So the following person intends to move into the rental unit and occupy for at least 1 year. So I can say that, and it has to be a close relation. Me, my parent, my spouse's child, my spouse's parent, or a person who provides or will provide care services to any of those people will be moving into this rental unit. So the landlord and tenant board accepts that as a valid reason to ask a tenant to vacate. Okay, if you have a close family member moving into the property. I have signed an agreement of purchase and sale of the rental unit, and the following person intends to move into the rental unit. The purchaser, the purchaser's spouse, the purchaser's child, the purchaser's parent, the purchaser's spouse, or the purchaser's spouse's parent. So again, and they'll do care service providers for all of those as well. These are the only reasons they will accept for you to end the tenancy on the sale of a property, is if the person's moving in themselves, or if you want to vacate your tenant, if you want to move in yourself, if you're not selling the property. And they won't let you, and most of the time you have to be very careful, because I've had clients who say, you know what, this tenant's been here for 10 years and I can get a lot more rent because I've done the rental increases every year, and they're very, very small, very incremental, right? Maybe $30, $40 every year. And then all of a sudden rent jumps and they're getting $1,300 when they could be getting $1,800 for the property. So they ask if they can serve these kind of notices. The problem is that if the tenant finds out that it wasn't somebody who moved into the property, or you really didn't sell the property, they can come back and go through the landlord and tenant board and sue you for damages that way, that you vacated them for no reason. So you have to be very cautious of how you use these forms. But most of the time we're doing it for our clients because they are selling the property. They do have an agreement of purchase and sale in hand, and they are using this form correctly, right? All right, so that's what selling with an active lease. Let's shoot that in. There we go. When you're putting together an application for a property, I noticed that a lot of people miss a couple things. So as listing agents, I think we've gotten pretty used to the fact that we need the standard form of lease now for our agreement to lease. So the landlord and tenant board no longer, remember there used to be a clause in our agreement to lease saying this agreement to lease will serve as the formal lease for the property between the landlord and tenant, basically, right? That's not allowed anymore. They want a standard form of lease filled out. So I'll just show you what that looks like if you guys haven't used that yet. Okay, it's also called the residential tenancy agreement, standard form of lease. So this basically just goes over. So now when we do the agreement of lease, I always explain to my clients that this is more of a negotiation on paper, but when you go to firm up your lease, you have to do the standard form of lease, and that will in itself form your lease from now on, as per the landlord and tenant board. So the standard form of lease is just the landlord and the tenant's information here, okay? And you have to list everybody in the property, and then the address of the property, whether or not it's a condominium. And a quick side note, a lot of times we forget that when we rent a condominium to people as a listing agent, we have to provide the condo rules and regulations to that tenant. Because we're renting out our property, we're still responsible for the actions of that whoever we rent the property to. So you have to get from your client, when you're listing a property, the condo rules and regulations to pass on to that tenant that's moving in. So they're aware of what the rules and regulations are for the building, like no barbecues on the balcony. You can't have a tenant barbecuing and saying, oh, I didn't know, because you're giving them this paperwork, right? So whether or not it's a rental unit in a condominium, Then you have to give the contact information for the landlord. I know a lot of landlords are hesitant to do this. Ones that are really hesitant, you can put your office information and have you be the frontline contact if they need any information. But tenants need to know how to contact their landlord for reasons, whether they want to serve them a landlord and tenant board notice, whether they have an issue with the property regarding maintenance or something to that effect. You have to provide contact information for them, right? So it just starts with the tenancy agreement, the term. So you're going to put whether it's a fixed length or a monthly tenancy, when the tenancy starts, when the rent is to be paid, whether it's monthly or weekly, what are the terms of the payment. And the tenant will pay the following rent: base rent, on whether there's additional parking or other services and utilities that they're paying on top. So if you told your tenant, okay, you have to pay this rent, but you're paying the condo fees directly or something for that. Or you're paying this rent plus a flat fee of $300 for the utilities monthly. This is where you'd itemize that.
Condo fee normally owner, no?
Yeah, normally the owner includes it. I'm just saying
Okay.
if there's something additional here, this is where you'd put it on the standard form of lease. So sometimes, there might be 3 students in a condo that you're renting, for instance, and you might say to them, okay, this is the rent, but monthly right now, we're going to pay $150 each for utilities, just to sort of split it up or something like that, just to make it easier in that respect. So this is where you itemize that, and if you're paying additional for parking. So you might rent a condo. So my best friend, we rent her condo at Warden in St. Clair. Right now, the tenants in there aren't using her parking spot. So we take it separate and we rent it for her. Whereas if we put it on the lease, we always say, okay, if you want the parking spot, it's $90 on top of the rent, right? So this is where you put that kind of information on the standard form of lease, right? Okay, so the tenant cannot be required to pay by post-dated checks or automatic payments. This is a huge one because in real estate, we're used to that clause being there all the time. The clause always says the tenant agrees to pay the landlord 10 post-dated checks after we give the first and last month's deposit, okay? This is only if the tenant agrees, okay? The tenant, as per the landlord and tenant board, has every right to pay however they want. If they want you to come pick up cash every month, you do that. If they decide to give you 10 post-dated checks, great. If they rather e-transfer you, you have to accept it. You have to understand as the landlord, as long as they're paying you rent dutifully every month, they have a right to choose how they want to pay. So your landlord cannot enforce that, no, okay, I'm not renting to this person because they're not giving me 10 post-dated checks. Okay, and that's as per the landlord and tenant board. They can't enforce that. If the first rental period is a partial period, the tenant will pay a partial rent of. So we see this very often where maybe our clients just closed on a property today and it's almost the first. So we might not get it rented for the first, but someone might come rent it for the 15th. But our landlord says to us, I'd rather get paid on the first every month. You could probably go back and do a per diem from the 15th of this month to the 1st of next month, right? This is where you'd put the partial rental period in there, but then you'd say that, at least, but the dutiful rent will be paid from the 1st from here on in, right? If the tenant's check is returned because of non-sufficient funds, the tenant will have to pay the landlord's administration charge of. This cannot be more than $20. So there's a lot of confusion with this. I've seen our real estate papers often say $40, right? We're used to that clause being in there. If you guys have done a lot of leases, you see it says $40. That is not allowed. That's not enforceable by the landlord and tenant board. But be mindful, this is the administration charge. So I always tell our clients, they go $20, that's all I'm allowed to charge. No, it's $20 administration charge plus whatever NSF fee you incur in your account. So if it's $42.50 because the check is bounced back, because the tenant's check is bounced back, you get to charge $62.50, $42.50 plus this $20 NSF. So it's actually more than the $40 we're putting in our contracts, right? We're just not allowed to arbitrarily charge the $40. It has to be 20 plus the NSF, right? 20 is the max.
NSF bank charging for the client.
Yeah.
And then the office, if you return, they will charge for us also.
Yeah, so we're allowed, whatever NSF fees you can prove that you've been charged for a bad check return, you can back charge that to the tenant, plus a $20 administration fee for the trouble. But $20 is the cap at the landlord and tenant board. That's the max you're allowed to charge, right? The following services are included in the lawful rent. So you're going to put here what the breakdown is. Are you including the gas and the AC? Are you including the storage space downstairs in the locker? Are you including laundry or guest parking? other, you can itemize it all here, what you're charging, right? Again, the following utilities are the responsibility of, whether the electricity or the heat or the water is the landlord and tenant. This is where you would itemize it here. Whether there's any rent discounts. So are you discounting the rent because the tenant is going to come in and paint the whole place for you? So maybe you're discounting the rent for the first month they move in. Rent deposit. A rent deposit is not required, or the tenant will pay a rent deposit of. So we're only allowed to do first and last month's rent. No other deposits, no damage deposits, no random deposits, nothing. The only thing the landlord and tenant board will allow is a key deposit. So a lot of times, you know, the fobs and stuff in the buildings and the condo buildings, they cost, you know, $100 or $200 to replace. And you're giving both tenants that are moving in key fobs, garage keys, mailbox keys. You know, it's another one that's kind of expensive because they have to call out Canada Post to rekey the boxes and stuff. So you're allowed to charge $250, $300 key deposit, but you're not allowed to, and as long as they return all the keys and fobs at the end of their term, you have to give that key deposit back. There is no deposit that you can randomly keep because you decide, you walk into the property and decide, oh, it's not in a clean enough state, or they damage the walls. There's no damage deposits allowed anymore as per the landlord and tenant board, because they found that too many landlords were just arbitrarily keeping it because, you know, they walk in and say, oh, I don't like the way the place looks, even though it was quite decent, right? If your landlord has a tenant move out that has destroyed the property or has done something, they have the right to go to the landlord and tenant board and sue that person, you know, for damages. The only problem is that you have to be a smart agent. So if you've rented the property and your client's coming to you and they're saying, in a couple of months, my tenant's moving out, I need you to rent this property again for them, okay? You need to walk into that property ASAP. You can't wait till the end of the lease term, because you can only go to the landlord and tenant board for a tenant that is currently residing in your property. Once they leave, it becomes a small claims court matter. Okay, so what you're going to do for your tenant is that, for your landlord client, is you're going to walk into that property and you're going to say, hey, can I just come in and take a look around to see the state of the property, get a feel for what I'm going to be listing, and make that appointment a month or two before they vacate. So you can report to your clients what the state of the property is, because if they need to go and proceed in anything, they have to do it within that time limit before they move out. So just keep that in mind. You can't have the tenant move out and then walk into the vacant property and ready to rent it and then get hit with a surprise saying, oh my God, the property's in such bad shape. And then not only that, you're not only not able to chase the tenant, you have to go to small claims, but now you have a time gap where your client isn't going to be getting paid for that property because you can't go and rent it immediately for them. So it's good in different ways to go. I always do call it a walkout inspection, right? It's a walkout inspection or move out inspection, right? Okay, smoking is a really iffy one. So I know we all put, and everybody's so picky about this, no smoking, no pets on the premises. As for the landlord and tenant board, when I rent a property, it's my dwelling. I can choose what to do in it. Okay, it kind of works two ways. So you cannot put, you can put, there's no smoking within the property. If I live upstairs and the person lives downstairs, I'm renting downstairs, because I can say it affects my health. If I'm renting a condo unit though, the smoking rules would have to be something like, there's no smoking inside the rental unit. If you choose to smoke inside the rental unit or have a pet in the rental unit and do, you know, whatever damage to the property, you're required to return it to the state that you received the property in. Okay, so if your pet has, you know, ripped up the carpet, scratched the carpet, or damaged the walls or something, in fact, you're required to repair that at the end of your lease term. You can't tell people though that they cannot have a pet. I know it's so standard and it's so common in real estate everyday practice when we're renting these properties, but technically it's not allowed as per
the lease. No barbecue in the balcony and no smoking, and did people still do it?
People still do it. So, okay, barbecuing on the balcony and smoking in the property are two different things. So barbecuing on the balcony is a big insurance liability for the condo building. If they have decided that there's no barbecuing on the balcony, it's because their insurance policy isn't covering it. So maybe they've offered barbecues on the rooftop terrace. A lot of condo buildings won't allow that barbecue on the balcony. They're not insured. So if your tenant does that, it's a big problem. You're probably going to turn around and get a fine from your condo board, right? Because your tenant's breaking the rules. This is why, as a listing agent, if you're renting a condo for your client, you have to ask for the condo board rules and regulations, and you have to give a copy of that, whether you email or physically hand it to the co-op agent and say, give this to your client. You have to provide those rules and regulations to the tenant, right? Smoking is a different thing. So unless there is, it could be a condo board rule that there's no smoking in the building, right?
And then they still smoke.
Again, they still smoke, right?
Ah.
There's been instances that I've heard, not my personal listing, but from the last office I was at, where the condo board was coming and complaining that the tenant was smoking because the people in the units around were complaining that the tenant was smoking so much, right? So because, and actually I think it was cannabis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the landlord and tenant board, because they cannot say they're not allowed to smoke in their dwelling, the onus actually fell on the landlord to provide equipment to this person so they wouldn't affect the enjoyment of the neighbors around them. So the landlord actually went and bought, I don't know, I'm not very familiar, but they it was a case we were studying actually. They had gone and they bought certain devices where you smoke through or you blow through that disperses the smell, so you can't smell the cannabis when they're smoking it, right? And they had to provide these things to the person that was living in the condo. It fell on the onus of the landlord because the tenant was their responsibility, right? And the people around were complaining. So you have to be careful with these things because they can't stop them from doing it, right? Because they're allowed to, it's their dwelling, but you have to make sure your tenant is adhering to the rules and regulations of not disturbing the neighbors around, right? Tenant insurance. So tenant insurance is another matter. Tenants often say to me, why do I need insurance, right? Well, because the landlord's insurance is covering liability and the property, but they're not covering the tenant's contents. So a lot of times you ask your tenant to get insurance to cover their own contents should there be a flood or a fire or something happen in that case. And they cover a certain amount of liability on that tenant insurance as well, if they get hurt or something happens in the property.
They said, sorry,
That's okay.
they said last time I rented and they said 1 million liability.
Yeah.
And the other agency is supposed to get rented somewhere for the main.
It just depends what your landlord is looking for or how much the coverage is costing. It can be 1 or 2 million. I've seen both when people get tenant insurance. Yeah.
After we change it to.
It's just like when you call for your car, you can choose, you know, what kind of liability you want to cover. Obviously, the more it'll cost you monthly, but.
You mentioned in our contract, return 2 million, so I find out that.
Yeah. No, but I've heard both. Yeah. So this covers some of the basic stuff here at the end of the residential tenancy form. Changes to the rental unit. As you see, normally we have that clause in there. You can't change or alter the rental unit without written permission from the landlord. Maintenance and repairs. The landlord's going to keep it in a good state of good repair. The tenant has to report of any problems happening right away. So if there's a leak in the sink, let me know right away. If I can fix it before it becomes a bigger problem, right? Assignment and subletting. So a lot of people here, again, I see this in our real estate contracts, we don't allow subletting. As per the landlord and tenant board, tenants are allowed subletting, right? So tenants, the rule, I'm getting a lot of weird faces here in the office, but the rule is the tenant can bring a prospective tenant. So basically they put it in place because you have to be reasonable. The landlord and tenant board always looks at what's reasonable. And a lot of times it does favor the tenant. So the reason they say that they're allowed to sublet is life. I all of a sudden moved into this and 6 months into it, my job got transferred to Windsor. I now have to leave. So it shouldn't mean that I'm locked into this lease because of that. So as per the landlord and tenant board, what happens is they say that I can bring a prospective tenant up to my landlord for reasonable reasons, not just I feel like leaving, right?
Including the rental apartments.
Yeah, everything. And you can bring it forth to your landlord. Your landlord has 7 days to accept or refuse that prospective tenant that you brought to them. If they refuse, then it's their onus to go forth and find a new tenant because you've done your due diligence to try and bring them, as long as you have a reasonable reason. Yes.
And this tenant has to be of the same standing as the current tenant.
The landlord, it doesn't have to be the same, but the landlord has to agree. So if you bring somebody with trash credit and they're getting kicked out of their apartment, your landlord doesn't have to agree, and you can't say, well, I tried to find a tenant. Right?
That's what
You
I'm
know,
saying. So-
exactly,
so,
yeah.
like, it does have to be somebody.
It has to be
that-
someone of good caliber.
of
Yeah, you
good
still have to
caliber,
find
you know,
like a
like
decent
temporary.
tenant for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to do your due diligence on both sides, right? But the tenant has to bring someone, yeah. Additional terms. Landlords and tenants can agree to additional terms. Examples may include terms that require the landlord to make changes to the unit before the tenant moves in, provide rules for uses in common spaces or amenities, don't allow pets. However, the landlord can require the tenant to comply with condominium rules. So again, for instance, if I say no pets, I was telling you it's not necessarily allowed. If I'm renting a house, I can have a pet. But if it's a condo, the condo might have a rule that there's no pets, or no dogs bigger than 10 pounds, or no more than 2 pets in each unit, right? Did you have a question, Simone?
I just thought of a scenario that would be
For sure.
so let's say subletting wants to sublet, right? And they bring in somebody and the landlord and that person split rent.
What do you mean? Like if they want to bring in an additional person to be with them? So again, the landlord, when you fill out, I'm going to go over the rental application real quick here. When you fill out a rental application, you have to itemize who's going to be in the unit. If you're bringing someone in to come and help you pay the rent, or you just find you need a roommate to help you with the rent, you have to notify your landlord, because they need to know who's in the property for insurance purposes. So that we'll go over the rental application in a minute. You have to itemize the adults, the people on the lease, and also all the kids, pets, everything that you're putting in the rental unit. So I don't know if I guess if he's going to help you with the rent, your landlord might want to screen them. But the thing is, if you have a lease in place already, the landlord's already screened you to say that you're capable of paying the rent. So I wouldn't really see the purpose unless you wanted them on the lease and you wanted them to be 50% responsible. Do you know what I mean? Like if I was moving in with you and you're like, 6 months from now, I don't want you to turn around and leave because I need you to pay the rent. I'm going to put your name on this lease and ask my landlord, because if you're named on the lease, you're duly responsible then, right? I can't just walk away and say, I don't feel like paying anymore. See you later, Simone, right? So, but if it's just someone that's moving in, I would just notify the landlord for insurance purposes. I don't think they need to screen them or put them on the lease. No, not when you bring someone in like that. Yeah. It depends though. Like if you've rented a whole house and you've got students coming and going in the basement, your landlord's definitely going to perk up if they hear that there's lots of people coming and going. So if you're not letting them know, then that would be a form of subletting. Do you know what I mean? Like I've had an instance where somebody rented the upstairs and they had students coming and going, and they were basically covering their rent by doing this, right? And the landlord didn't like it because they rented and now these people are subletting, right? The landlord, if they wanted to rent it that way, would make more money, obviously, be renting top and bottom, right? So you have to let your landlord know if you're doing something like that for sure. And I don't think that they'd allow it like a sublet in that kind of way. Yeah, a sublet is normally a sort of an escape clause for you if you need to leave the property for some reason and you can't honor the balance of the term of your lease. What's up, Sridhar? How can I help you?
So, is it a 2-month notice when you even reside more than a year in the same property?
Is it what, sorry?
60 days notice, right? You need to give them 60 days notice, or is it 1 month notice?
The amount of notice you need to give them depends on their payment term. So if they're paying monthly, then you need to give them 60 days notice. If they're paying bi-weekly, then you can give them a month notice. It's 2 payment periods that you have to give them.
No, it's not about the duration of the lease, like 1 year.
It is about the duration of the lease, for sure. You can't serve them early on their lease. You have to honor the term. So like I was saying, if their lease term ends in December, you either have to sell the property and let the purchaser know they have to assume the tenant until December, or you can offer your tenant incentives to leave and get them to sign an N11. So sometimes you have a nice tenant who understands and 60 days is enough notice for them. And even though their lease doesn't end till December, they might say, sure, I'll sign an N11 because the landlord might have said, you know what, I'm going to pay your last month's deposit and my agent will help you find a property, right? And in that case, they might sign an N11 saying they'll end their lease term early. If someone is refusing, then you cannot kick them out before their lease term is over. It can't be until December.
No, I understood. My scenario is that I am, for example, take my case. I'm living in a residential rental unit,
right?
Low-rise apartments. I stayed there for a lease term, which is 1 year.
Mhm.
And then, the property management guys, they don't renew the agreement, they just go on month
You
from
go
the
to month to
second
month.
year. Yeah, month to month starting from the second year, right?
Yeah.
So those scenario, is it a 60 days notice? I'm talking about the tenant has to give the notice because they want to move to newer place, right? So do they need to give a 60 days
60
notice
days.
or 60
Days.
days?
Yeah, two payment periods. Two payment
Yeah.
periods when you're month to month like that. Yeah.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. So under this additional terms part, you can either click that there's no additional terms, or this tenancy agreement includes an attachment with additional terms that the landlord and tenant agreed to. So I often click this off and I attach the agreement of purchase and sale because there's lots of clauses in there in addition to what's on the standard form of lease that we put into our agreement to lease. So I just normally attach that with this lease and say that all of that forms the lease together, right? And then it's just the signatures page and some information on how to fill out the form at the end of it, in case you get stuck doing that. Do I have any questions so far?
If it tenant and landlord 1 year agreement for the lease.
Yeah.
So what happened after 1 year finish in the tenant want to stay there? Still they will come to the agent, same agent, or they don't?
No, if the tenant wants to stay there, they have two options.
Yeah.
They can ask their landlord for a lease renewal, but they can't wait till the end of the year. They have to do it 60 days before.
Yeah.
So as the tenant, you can ask them for a lease renewal. So if you want to ensure that you have another year term, or some people might ask for a longer term now that they've proved and got a relationship with that landlord. I want a year or two more. Okay. If you don't do that, you automatically turn into a month-to-month tenant, which is a scary situation because you don't have a term now that you can rely on. If your landlord wants to turn around and sell the house a month from now, you don't really have much choice. They can just give you that 60 days notice. Whereas as a tenant, I advise them, hey, get another lease term signed, get a lease renewal signed, right? And lock them into another year or two. Right?
They come back to the old agent, or they can go.
No, I don't think they come back to an agent because you're not doing the screening work and finding the tenant. It's just a lease renewal. So I don't think that you can
You don't
get
get the
like,
commission.
you're not gonna get the half month's rent again.
You don't get the
Exactly.
commission.
Exactly, right?
In case they
You go
come,
directly
in
to
case
the-
they want to save and they say, okay, no, I am going with my agent, then the landlord have to give the things, no?
The notice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, then the landlord say, okay, we have to pay the commission. In case the tenant wants the agent, same agent help.
Yeah, but the tenant wants the same agent's help for what? To stay in the property or to
Yeah,
find another property?
Stay.
If you're staying in the same property, like I say, you're not screening that tenant again.
Yeah.
You're not giving the supporting documents to the landlord. They're not gonna do another credit check. They've already been there a year.
Yeah.
So I don't see any reason where where we could help. Like, we don't do lease renewals. Like, I run a small property management company. I do lease renewals. I have a standard form. It just looks like a mini form of a lease that says, okay, you know, in good standing, and we're going to renew it for this term for tenants that want it to ensure that the landlords are going to give them another year or two in the property, right? Other than that, most of the time they just go month to month. As agents, we don't really have work to do for lease renewal. It's not something we do
Find them another property and.
unless you move them to another property.
Yeah,
Exactly. And then you can find them another property.
Same property.
Yeah. Another thing to mention before lease renewal time, you want to know that it's 3 months notice that needs to be given. It's not 2 months, 3 months for a rental increase. Okay, so you need to go and you need to check with the rental increase. I didn't pull the form today to show you guys, I should have. But I can, maybe if I have enough time, I can search for it. You need to go and see what the rental increase is for the year. So whether it's 2.1, 2.6, whatever the case may be, calculate that. Okay, it's 32.50 rental increase. You need to serve that to the tenant 3 months before their lease renewal in order to get that increase. So a lot of agents and a lot of people I find get stopped up and they wait. They think it's 2 months because everything is 2 months, you know, 2 pay periods, but it's 3 pay periods for the rental increase. Yeah, it is. It's 90 days, the notice that you need to give the tenant for a rental increase. Yeah. So I'm just gonna go here to this other form.
Yeah.
That's okay. Hi, Joanna. That's okay. Okay, so we went over all of that. I want to go over this brochure real quick. This I never see happen. Now I know as real estate agents, a lot of us have started using the residential tenancy form, which is great because a lot of people, when they brought it into play, I think it was I think you had to use it as of August 2018 or something like that. People weren't using it in real estate transactions. I was asking agents for it and they were like, what? They didn't know. So that's good that we're using that. The N11s, the N12s, I've gotten a lot of agents used to using that because I know it's not an everyday form that we use as agents, but it gives that a layer of security for our buyers and our sellers. When a tenant moves into a property, the landlord and tenant board requires that we provide them with this brochure. So I remember I was talking about giving them the condo board rules and regulations. This is sort of something that you give everybody, whether they're in a condo or a house. It just is basic information for tenants. And I don't know why they insist that we educate the tenants over and over again about the law, the role of the landlord and tenant board, tenants' rights and responsibilities, what their,
20 page long.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, right?
Who's got the time to read those 20 pages?
It's okay, but you're supposed to serve every tenant with it when they move into the property. And you have to like show, so normally I email this. I normally email it to the agent and say, give it to your tenant, give it to your client, right? Landlord's rights and responsibilities, right? And then contact information for the landlord and tenant board. So this is a brochure that I never ever see people use, but we're supposed to be giving this to every tenant that moves into a property. So I just wanted to bring your guys' attention to that. And if you guys get confused, you can either watch this video back, or maybe we can do a checklist, or if you're doing a lease or need a reminder what you need to include, you guys can always come to me for help. And then the last thing is the rental application, which we're pretty familiar with because it's like a ORIA form that we're using on the daily basis, but we have to fill out the form properly. A lot of people I know that think that only the people being on the lease need to be named, but it's important that you put everybody, like I was saying, on the lease, whether they be children or grandpa living with us, because the landlord is covering insurance based on, there's 5 people living in this property. And they want to ensure that you're not overcrowding and you're going up to the fire regulations. They want to know the last 2 places of residence. Note to the wise, as a listing agent, the last landlord is not the best reference. Okay, I've learned this over the years. If a landlord has a troublesome tenant that they want to get rid of, they're going to give them a glowing review. Okay, so last 2 places of residence, I know they have the name of the landlord and telephone number, and a lot of times we call them up for our clients and they say, oh yeah, they're a great tenant, take them, because they want to get rid of them. They're going to give them a glowing reference. So I usually call employers and personal references. I find them to be a little more correct, you know what I mean? And I always ensure the most important thing for me is income going to cover. I know we're big sticklers for credit on the listing. I know a lot of people say, oh no, the credit, I want full credit report with score. My experience over the years is I use my gut a lot because I know that people with really, really good credit have really screwed me over in rent over the years. I had this one gentleman who worked for the Toronto District School Board. He was a teacher, and another lady, had worked, and he had worked there for like 25 years. And another lady, his wife, who worked for the Aboriginal Society for 20 years. They both had well-paying jobs. They were both doing really, really well. Their credit was stellar, and I didn't get paid rent for over a year with them. I had to take them all through the landlord and tenant board. So don't base it on that. Base it on, I love to do a meet and greet. Did you want to sit down? You guys want to sit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Come sit. I love to do a meet and greet with the tenants, with my landlords, because you get a good feel whether they have a good rapport with each other. It's super important when you meet the person and you get a good gut feel for them. And definitely the employment has to cover. So you want to make sure that there's a healthy employment, healthy income coming in to cover the rent. Those are the 2 most important things for me. But you guys screen your tenants as you wish for your clients. Just remember you're doing due diligence for them at the end of the day. I talk a lot about due diligence, but you have to ensure that you're getting a good tenant for your client. You don't want to just go, oh yay, I got an offer, let's get it accepted, right? You do want to go over those references, call the employer, and ask for anything else that your landlord wants as a reference. If they want credit, I know I'm not a big fan of it, but I say, okay, fine, no problem. Yeah, I'll pull the credit for you. We'll get their credit report and show you. So does anybody have any other questions? Do you guys have any horror stories of when you sell a property with tenants in it? What terrible things have happened? Sometimes, like I say, it's super important to get a good relationship with that tenant. Do a meet and greet with them as soon as you get the listing. I always ask to go in before the tenant is moved out to meet them, look at the state of the property, meet the tenant, have that conversation with them, and be really nice and assure them, oh, it's going to go super smooth. I'm going to give you the 24 hours notice. Get their phone number directly so you can call them and let them know when appointments are happening and that, because they can make or break the sale of your property, and you really have to have a good rapport with them. Does anybody have any questions there online for me? How are you guys? You guys sell lots of rental properties over the years?
I have a question. Just in like, how do you handle the wear and tear? Like, it's you know, it's very tricky. Like, for example, if you have a glass top stove, they would
Yeah.
have replaced the new one, and then the when you open the grill stuff, it will become like you know, the stainless steel thing will become dirty, and they make marks on the glass top. And also the minor paintings issues. What I generally do that I take a video or pictures of the starting of the lease, and I'll share it with the listing agent and be on the safer side.
Right.
But some property management guys generally rip the tenant actually when they move out, because
Right.
they don't want them anymore, right? So they ask a lump sum, which is huge actually.
So it's harder to chase people. It is harder to chase people. So I know that it's not our job as real estate agents. I, as my property management over the years, live and die by move in and move out inspections. Okay, so we do a move in inspection and we walk, and I have a checklist, and I can share with you guys if you're willing to do the work to go in for your clients and help them with this. I know it's not a service that we normally provide though. I go in and I go room by room. And I usually let them live there a week or so they can get familiar with the place, because it's not fair if you're moving to a place you don't know. So a week or two into their tenancy, I walk in with my checklist and I go, okay, let's check the state of the property. And they'll say, oh, did you know that this plug isn't working? Okay, noted. Okay, there was this hole in the wall. Okay, noted. So it works both ways. So the tenant doesn't get blamed for things that they didn't do when they move out from the end of their tenancy, and the landlord has time to recoup. So then a month or two before their tenancy is ending, if they're not renewing, or if they're moving out, or if the landlord's selling the property, I take that same list in their file and we go and we do the move outside, and we compare it to how it's been since they moved in, right? If there are additional holes in the wall, or if the carpet is just in a terrible state now because their doggy has, peed on it, or, the kids have written all over the walls, I have a conversation with them saying, you sign the move-in inspection. They sign it at both times, the move-in part and the move-out part. This wasn't here when you did your move-in inspection. Please note that you're going to, we're going to come in and fix this before you leave, and you will get a charge for it, or you could choose to fix it before you leave and return it to the state it was in according to your move-in inspection. That's the biggest insurance for your clients. That's the biggest thing we can do, because like I say, once the tenant leaves the property, it's really hard to chase them. You have to chase through small claims court. Then at that point, you can't just go to the landlord and tenant board, because you have no control. They're no longer your tenant, right? So you have to be prepared with that stuff. Yeah.
No, it's other way around also, right? They sometimes they take more money from the tenants. Actually, you are talking on the landlord point of view, but I'm talking about on the tenant point of view. Actually,
Yeah. You can't take more money because you're not allowed to take the deposit. So unless your tenant is willingly giving up the money, you know what I mean? Like, that's why they stopped damage deposits, because so many people were having disputes about the state of the property from move-in to move-out date, that landlords were just arbitrarily keeping damage deposits. That's why the landlord and tenant board doesn't allow that anymore. So if from the tenant point of view, if my landlord's really mad at me because the carpet's, in a bad state, and I know that I've signed a move-in inspection, it wasn't like that, I better fix it, right? Or I know that he's going to probably chase me for it, right? So if the tenant is willingly giving money, right, that's great. Maybe the landlord can fix it and everybody can leave and everybody be happy.
okay.
Sorry, I had a question. Oh, awesome. Okay, good. Anybody else got any questions? Like I say, hopefully you guys are going to go over all these forms. I want to warn you, I want to caution you, if you do have any landlord and tenant board matters, the reason why I push these forms forward is because I've been to the tribunal so many times. They come down on us hard as real estate agents because we're expected to know these things. So if you haven't seen the N11 before, or the N12, or the brochure for the information for new tenants, and your landlord is gotten into some kind of trouble and they want you to come and represent them or help them at the tribunal for their case, you're going to get slammed if you don't follow these things, because even though it's not something that's widely known, I know it's not in our web forms. They don't preach it at the real estate level. Because we're in the field, the tribunal comes down hard on us real estate agents when we have issues with tenants, and we're representing our landlords. So if you guys are unsure, come to me. I've been to the tribunal so many times for different things now. Hopefully I can help you guys, and hopefully your transactions go smooth with tenants from now on. So
One more question.
for sure.
What happened in case the tenant owner as a representative forever?
Mhm.
It's also possible in case
The tenant wants a representative for,
forever until the leasing time. In case the rent not paid or something.
okay,
It's also the agent can take a responsibility and charge them money or something.
that's not something within our landlord, that's not something within our license, our real estate license that we normally do. That's more like property management side. So, like I include a certain amount of my package for every month when I'm monitoring properties for my clients, because a lot of them are out of town or out of province. And it would be to deal with making sure the rent is collected on time. And if it isn't, serving notices like the N4 and stuff right away.
But
So
then if you have of them, you can ask them.
if
okay,
you want to
call
take your
them or
time and
something,
do it, yeah.
call
Mhm.
them or something, and you this is the tenant, so my rent comes. So
If they want to like pay you on the side because you're taking time to go to the landlord and tenant board or serve a notice, I'm sure you can do that. The only thing RICO is super sticky is we are not allowed to trade outside of our license. So no renting, no leasing outside of our license.
Yeah.
But if you're providing other services for your client,
only help them, yeah, the vacation or something.
you have to be
Take
careful that
off.
it's doesn't become a business though, because you have to declare that to RICO, right? So I had to declare to RICO about the property management, and they were like so
Okay.
sticky about it. I had to give them affidavits that I'm not trading outside of my license, and I'm only doing tenant relations and property maintenance. Yeah.
So, if you wanted to branch out though, like, if you wanted to become a property manager or a mortgage broker or something, like, can you, like, do you just have to let them know that you're gonna be doing this?
Absolutely. So if you go into your mortgage broker course and you get that, or you decide to incorporate a property management company or something, whatever you're trying to venture out and do, even if it's not related to real estate, RICO wants to know. Even if you're starting an IT business on the side, you have to declare that to RICO because they're insuring you at the end of the day. They want to know all the businesses you're doing.
Okay, like, basically my question is it that we're not allowed to do it, or they just wanna know?
No, they want to know, and they want to make sure it's not a conflict of interest with your license.
What would be a conflict of interest?
Me running a property management company and I say, hey, you can put it up on MLS, but I can probably put it up on Kijiji cheaper and rent that property for you. Big conflict of interest, not allowed to trade outside of your license, right? So they want to make sure that you're not doing, because they're insuring you at the end of the day for your transactions, right? If something goes wrong, people might say, well, they're a real estate agent. I'm going to go sue RICO, even though it was property you listed on Kijiji and you didn't do it through the brokerage. That's a big no-no for them. That's a huge conflict of interest, right?
So can you manage properties or become a manager, property manager?
Yes,
How would you
but
do that?
but because I offer client services to go and collect the rent monthly, and if the tenant calls and there's problems with the property, to come and fix it, because I have maintenance guys working for me, and to make sure I deal with their rent increase every year. I remember their rent increase, their lease renewals. It's
We're
basically
talking about
headache free,
maybe
to have a
100
tenant.
Units or 300 units?
I don't have a property that big, but yeah, if you did, then you need some kind of help, I'm sure, right?
And have an
So
office within that.
exactly, that'd be nice.
You know,
Anyways, if you guys have any questions going forward, let me know. If you're about to list a rental property and you just want some advice, you want to chat about it, let me know. And I would most certainly like to help you guys
is there
have a
courses
smooth
for
transaction.
Property management or not?
Sorry?
Is there courses for property management? You have
I think there is. Yeah, I think there are.
Such as within REIT or within or?
Oria used to have, and I believe Seneca has as well,
Oria, eh?
but I never took any of them. It just something that came organically over the years as a need for my
Mhm.
clients, right?
But you
So
have to have the license, right?
you don't have to, no,
To
No.
be a property manager of any kind.
No.
Oh,
no, yeah.
so you just say,
So just provide the services for your client as long as they're willing to pay for it, right? So
To see one more thing.
Yes.
I missed that one, sorry.
that's okay.
With a 1 year lease for a tenant.
Yeah.
And then you said they can review 6 months or something. If anything wrong, they can kick them out.
Yeah, they can kick them out for certain reasons. So non-payment of rent,
Yeah,
right?
that's fine.
Consistent late payment, damaging the property,
That's it.
ruining the enjoyment of others. Like if it's a top bottom rental, ruining the enjoyment of others. There's different reasons you can kick them out before their lease term. Absolutely. Yeah.
if they
6 months
are
into it.
involved, what are you gonna do?
You have to serve them the proper notice. So you serve them
If they
notice
don't
and then they don't leave, you go to the tribunal. The tribunal gives you, yeah, okay, you won, and they give you an order. You can go to the sheriff and have the sheriff evict them. And sheriff literally comes and changes the locks and says either get your stuff out or the locks are being changed. So it's a long process though. It's a long process, but
Yeah.
it's possible if you pursue. I've had the sheriff come many a time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I see a lot of
Take
people.
this 1 year to.
Right now with COVID,
Yeah.
tribunals were taking forever. I had posted for a client of mine in October, and February they approached me and said, oh, okay, we're going to start booking hearings now for this. And I was like, I already dealt with the matter with the tenant, because from October to now I couldn't just sit, you know what I mean, and not do anything for my client. So they were taking a long time. Hopefully now that things are opening up, they'll get back into the swing of things and it won't take that long. Yeah, but it normally used to take a couple weeks to get to a tribunal. If you got an order to go to the sheriff, you could go to the sheriff and you have to give them a certain amount of days. I think it was another 2-3 weeks. And then the sheriff, you could call them the morning of and order the sheriff to go and say, yeah, they're still in the property. So
The biggest problem for the mortgage payer, for the landlord, sometimes they don't pay even rent.
Yeah.
You get this problem.
Yeah.
If you 1 year, then back take the house.
Yeah.
Here they are, if they pay, if they're depending on the rental, then it's a problem. no?
yeah, no, for sure, for sure.
Christina,
Yes.
I've got a thing here to tell you.
Uh-huh.
There's a new tenant, okay, he rents an apartment unit.
Mhm.
And been there for 3 months.
Mhm.
And what happens is the people next door, they're smoking marijuana at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
3 o'clock, and the person cannot sleep and.
So that person has to
Really
complain to the
telling you.
landlord. That person has to complain to the landlord because the landlord's responsible for the tenant's actions. This is what I was
Right.
talking about. And they're ruining the reasonable enjoyment of the apartment beside them. And
Zero enjoyment, zero. eh?
Zero enjoyment. That's what I'm saying. And unfortunately, the onus is going to fall on the landlord unless they
So
can
what-
come, unless they can speak to their tenants and some
So if
improvement
they
is
go to
made.
Tenants once, twice, 3 times, and the tenants.
Yeah, see, so the tenants aren't doing anything. Like I say,
What if
the
the
last
tenant-
landlord that ran into this problem literally had to go and buy paraphernalia that, when they were smoking cannabis in the apartment, they blew it out and it
Yeah,
dissipated it so it
it's
didn't
possible.
smell anymore. And they had to request their tenants to smoke this way if they're choosing to smoke inside
but if
the
the tenant's been
condo.
there for 3 years, and the new
Yeah.
tenant only been there for.
I
3
know,
months,
it's
and
unfortunate
he's
though.
got
It
a
doesn't matter how
1 year
new they are, right?
And
So,
he's got a 1 year lease, and only the tenant's been there for 4 months or
Yeah.
3 months,
mhm,
and then the tenant says, I'm moving out.
Yeah.
I had enough of this,
Yeah.
I'm not enjoying it.
Yeah.
Gives a letter to the superintendent of the building.
Yeah.
the superintendent.
I know, it's tough.
So
But I can help you. I can help you. If it's a friend of yours, I can help you after. We'll just let everybody go here right now. So
Yeah,
everybody have a
okay.
good week. Let me know. So Thursday is July 1st. Sorry, Sebastian, 1 second. Thursday is July 1st. There's no training this week. Everybody have a good, happy Canada Day. Go see some fireworks, go enjoy with your family, go have a barbecue. I'm going to be up north with my feet up. So everybody enjoy this week. And then we're back next week. So next week we have a really interesting topic. I have someone coming in from Rico. And Rico, they're going to speak to us about our rights and responsibilities as agents a little bit. So it's definitely a good one not to miss. So I think there's 2 representatives that are going to be speaking from Rico. And so I'll page that topic out later on in the week. All right. Everybody have a good week. I'll talk to you soon. You're welcome.